Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.
You are listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.
Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast. This is your host, Dr. Larry Widman, sometimes known as Doc in the mindset world. Got Coach Jess Connect on as well, who's a mindset coach, volleyball coach, and wonderful human being. And we do this podcast because I've said over the last couple of decades, we've been able to work with some of the greatest coaches, teams, leaders, and athletes around the world. And we love to share what we learned from them and vice versa. And then when we have a guest on, obviously spend most of our time learning from our guest. I say my definition of maxing out is given the talent, the health, the injuries, and all the intangibles. Can a team reach the limits of their capabilities or an individual? And then can they do it under pressure? Because we always say if you can't do it when it matters, what's the point? Today, we are thrilled to have one of the elite volleyball coaches in the country on our podcast. He has coached high school. He's coached club. He's coached multiple college teams. He's starting, I think, his 12th year at the University of Wisconsin, at which he is 292-61. He's got a national championship. He's got multiple Final Four and championship final appearances. He's been a conference and regional coach of the year, the 2021 national championship for the University of Wisconsin. We're really excited to have you, Coach Kelly Sheffield. Welcome to the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Thanks for having me. I respect what you guys are doing, and Larry, like you know, I'm in the middle of your book right now, and people that you've been working with have encouraged me to go and read it. I'm having a blast doing so. So it's an honor to be here with y'all.
Wow, we really appreciate that. You know, it's only been a couple of weeks prior to purely observational watching Coach Sheffield over the years take his program to new heights, but because of some of our work with the Supernovas, he has a couple athletes on that played for him back in the day, Danielle Hart, Sydney Hilly, and I've got to know them a little bit. And so I reached out to Coach at Triple Crown and went up and said hello to him. And despite him having a lot of responsibilities there and watching courts, he spent 20 to 30 minutes locked in talking to me. And it really struck me just how present you were despite all the things going on there in your role there, that it could have been a 1-minute conversation and you made it much longer and was really appreciative. Coach, you heard my definition of maxing out. When you think about maxing out, what's your definition?
You know, it's something we talk about quite a bit as a program. I love the phrase, and that's what our goal is for each of our players and each of our teams. I don't think we're certainly unique in that situation. I think that's the case for anybody that decides to go into teaching or coaching, is to help young people reach their potential. For us, it's on and off the court. You know, it's one of the things we talk with young people about during the recruiting process is when you're done with your time here, whether it's 4 years, 5 years, or whatever, that this should catapult you to the rest of your life. And so there's an element that happens on the court. There's certainly the stuff off the court. There's, we're in a higher education, so there's an academic component to it, and teaching them life skills. And so, if it was just about, for me, if it was just about the wins and losses, I don't know, it would seem hollow to me. Although I thoroughly enjoy competing for wins and all that, but it's got to be more than that. We're trying to help them grow and if people, there's so much that goes into it, right? To be able to reach your potential, but maxing out to me is is helping somebody reach what they're capable of being at that point in their life.
Yeah, we love that. We love that because every journey is different. Every team has different ceilings depending on a lot of factors. We love the coach's journey. Everyone has one. Everyone gets to see you're at the top of one of the premier volleyball institutions in the world, but you have a unique journey. We know you coached at a lot of different levels. For those who don't know your journey or background, could you just give us a little bit of insights on sort of how you went from, your early adult years and graduating from college to becoming a volleyball coach, and a couple maybe interesting tidbits along the way before you got to Wisconsin?
Yeah, growing up, I love sports. I loved everything. Although I probably wasn't an elite athlete, I was a runner, and got started in the volleyball. I'm from Muncie, Indiana. Went to a school called Muncie Burris, which was kindergarten through 12, 750 students in the entire school. But back in the day, they were consistently winning and competing for state championships back in a single class, all comers tournament, and led by the great Steve Shondell, coach at Munciana. And I started all that when I was, I think, 19, and knew very little about the sport, that was around a lot of people that were great at teaching or patient with me, that would answer a lot of a young coach's questions along the way. And I, coached 13, 14, 16, and did every summer camp that I could be a part of. Went to every clinic that I could go a part of, and picked up the phone and asked as many stupid questions to different people as I possibly could. And then probably after 7 years, I think I got into college coaching. Was an assistant for 4 years, University of Houston, University of Virginia, at Clemson University, before I got my first head coaching job a couple months before 9/11 at the University at Albany in New York. And then was there for 7 years, went to University of Dayton for 5 years, and then started my time here at Wisconsin 2013.
Now, I know just my sense of you is you're not someone who likes to brag, but at what point along your journey did you realize you were pretty good at this thing called coaching?
I would say that I'm probably very similar to a lot of other coaches and probably a lot of athletes. That there's, I like the question, because that's a question I'll ask players when I'm recruiting them, or a transfer or something. When is it that you looked around, you're like, all right, I feel pretty good. But so I like the question, obviously, because I ask it. But I don't know. I think there's a lot of little moments that I think confirm that, all right, you're doing some good things. You're connecting with people. You're communicating the right way. You come out of a match and you feel like, all right, the preparation leading into that was good. Maybe you look back on a player's career, either, right after it's over or years later, and you feel like, I helped that person become who they were capable of being, helped them on their path. But there's also all these little reminders that, man, how little I really know and how much more I've got to know. And so those little things are, both of those are constantly happening. And it's one of the things I really love about this profession.
Yeah. It's such a balance, isn't it? Of learning, growing, and then reflecting on what we're good at. Coach Jess, you've been listening. What are your thoughts? What kind of questions do you have for Coach?
And I thank you for sharing your experience. And I think it's a lot of all of our listeners, coaches, can learn from as well, that your path, you have every experience that led you to where you're at today. Is there a moment in your past, whether it be coaching experience or as an athlete, that rings true really loud in how you're coaching your programs today? Is there a certain experience you've learned from, or is there something that maybe at the time you were questioning why you had to go through it that's made you a better head coach today? Anything from your past?
Man, it's so long. It's so many things. It's I knew nothing about this sport, and and I'm sure there's still some people out there that would say that holds true today. It's it's one of the things I love about this profession is that there's just so much meat on the bone, so many different ways to attack being great. I look back at one of my Albany teams, and there was a player that she transferred in. So I didn't recruit her. She transferred in from a junior college. She played her 2 years at a junior college, and then went on to a 4-year school. She wanted to out of high school. She wanted to stay in her hometown, and that was her choice. Was that one junior college that was right there? And then got the confidence and grew her game and all. And after 2 years, it was, all right, I'm ready to go to a 4-year school. And I happened to go 3,000 miles away. I didn't know her too well. And she came in, and it was a struggle. It was a struggle for me. It was a struggle for her. We just could not figure each other out. She was very emotional at times in practice. I was not very good for her. I thought I was doing the best I could at that point. Right around the time, things intersected where a former coach, Sue Medley, who'd been in the game for a while, got out of coaching and was just starting out with this thing. This must have been maybe 2005, maybe, with just getting involved with this group that did this business tool called the DISC. And you're shaking your head, so I'm sure that you know about it, and a lot of people are utilizing it. But I'm not sure it was quite in the sports landscape at that time. She was kind of talking with me about it, and so her and her business partner, we spent a lot of time discussing, and then we brought them in for a couple of days to work with our staff and then work with our team. And one of the first things they did was we want everybody to pair up in twos. And this girl that I was having a trouble connecting with, I said, hey, how about the two of us? And we're going through the DISC. And when I left that 48 hours, how I was communicating to her changed. Because instead of communicating in a way under stress that I prefer to be communicated to, I got the skill to communicate in a way that brings out the best in somebody else. And I think a lot of times under stress, we talk to others the way we prefer to be talked to. And in this case, it was crushing her career. I was crushing her career. I was crushing her self-confidence. I wasn't trying to do that. I just wasn't good for her in that moment. And then to see almost like that, a kid that started enjoying the game, enjoying practices, reaching her potential, maxing out what she was capable of being, all because I was able to communicate in a different way. I didn't lower the standards. Standards were still high, but it was just a different way of looking at how to speak to somebody. That was a really big moment. It continues to be a big moment in my career.
Doc, I think what you just said, Coach, is gold, because I think you can teach the IQ of volleyball, but there's an EQ to that. And it just showed that you were mindful and aware enough that you wanted to connect with an athlete that maybe you knew it just wasn't working. And most coaches, right, sometimes skip over it, some take the time. But Doc, I'm going to turn it back to you because you hit on a lot of the things that we train and teach at Max Out Mindset. But what are your thoughts?
Well, what stood out to me, Coach, is that communication is not that hard. High-level effective communication is really, really difficult. And most of the problems that we have in our lives, whether it be in coaching or in our relationships or wherever, often has to do with communication breakdown or miscommunication or not knowing how to communicate effectively. And so, one, just hearing you kind of talk that out, but two, I think the great coaches we've been around have this ability to reflect back and admit where what we call what's our contribution to the problem is one of my top ingredients for elite leaders, which is being able to get introspective enough to reflect back and go, if my athlete is struggling, yeah, they're part of that's on her. She's got to get better at certain things. But what's my role as the leader, the coach, or the teammate in my athlete behaving the way they are? And a lot of coaches won't go there to say, I contributed to that. And so that really stood out to me when I think about what makes you an elite coach. You said it without me even asking the question is to in that regard. So
let me jump in here. Something that we did after this year, I think it ties into what you're saying there.
Mm-hmm.
It was an exercise that I actually got from John Cook. I think he did this maybe about a decade ago, and I've done it twice in my career. One was probably about 5 seasons ago, and one was after this year. We got back out of this from the season. We got back in the office, and I gave our players, send them an anonymous survey, and with a bunch of questions about myself, each of our staff members. What are we doing what am I doing that is helping you in practice? Maybe it's body language, maybe it's tone, maybe it's how we're communicating. What barriers do I have or present to you in practice? Same thing in matches. What are our obstacles that we've got to work through as a team? How are the mindfulness that we're doing, is that worth the time? How can we do this better? The books that we've read over the years as a team, or the videos that we've watched, which one of you has meant the most to you and why? And then we met as a staff. It was a long meeting as a staff, and we're giving them everything here. I really appreciated that. That was a gift. It wasn't a one-on-one conversation. I think John actually mentioned this to maybe in a convention or something, but I took it as a gift of somebody who's had as much success as he has had, that is being open and vulnerable and curious and really wanting to learn from his athletes. I'm not sure that's something I would have done earlier in my career, to tell you the truth. I think when you're fighting to prove, and certainly somebody that didn't know the game of volleyball at all, there was a period of time that it was, I might have been trying to prove to myself and others that I did know something about it. But once you become a little bit more vulnerable, there's a lot of richness on the other side of that door if you're just asking the right questions. And man, that got me so fired up after reading the responses from them. And a lot of things we got to get better at as coaches, but it fired me up to get back in the gym with these guys.
Yeah, wow. Well, it makes us proud a little bit, because that's coming out of the work we did, a decade ago with him, and those kind of questions that were asked in the season of 2014, all the ones you just asked about, really, I think, led to what happened shortly thereafter. There's hundreds of factors, obviously, including lots of talent and great coaching. What I'm curious about, and I'll see what Jess has to say, is could you tell us one or two things? Again, not wanting to break into privacy. So was there one or two common themes that stood out to you when you got that information that said, boy, if we could just work on that a little bit better as a coaching staff, for myself, that's going to really materially maybe change, how they think and feel?
Yeah, it's one of the things I felt like I've got to get better as running our program. I've got a staff that we've been together a long time. Brittany Dildine and I have been together for 15 years now, and Gary White and I have been together for 13, and Jess Williams, it's been 12. She's our director of operations. Anne-Marie Hickey was a senior my first year here. Our trainer's been here the entire time. Our strength coach has been here all but my first year. And most of them were single and without children for a good portion of this. And so we were here all the time, first thing in the morning, all the way at night. We'd have this spontaneous pop-up meetings, and it was, and we were on the same page because we were constantly here and just talking. And if we weren't in the office, we were probably doing something together. We were going off to lunch together. We were having dinner together. But as they've had families, and myself included, and the kids are growing and people are having relationships, some of these, and, coming out of COVID where people may be working from home a little bit more. I haven't, there's been a need where I've had to switch from some of these pop-up meetings to maybe more scheduled meetings. And I have not done that. And I thought we paid the consequence of that this year, according to surveys, because what was coming back at us was we weren't always on the same page. And that's something we've always prided ourselves of being, speaking the same language, knowing exactly what it is that we're trying to do with each player, technically, tactically. And so there was certainly confusion that was coming out of some of those questionnaires with some of our athletes. And instead of pointing the finger at them of saying, well, this is your fault for not listening, or really blaming and saying, man, we're not good enough here. This is a problem, but it's an easy fix. And it also helps our staff members here by, let's be a little bit more organized when we're going to meet. Let's be, and just one of those changes that I think it's important. It's an important change, but it's how all of us have evolved and grown along the way.
Yeah, because we always say that the leaders need to model the behaviors they want for those they lead, and if they're not seeing that, then it's hard for them to all be on the same page. And like you said, so that's just really cool, insightful stuff, and what great coaches are thinking about. Even though we're, always chasing the top, the air on the mountaintop is thin, and that's what we're looking for. Jess, what do you hear? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a couple call outs I see, which is really great because you're mindful enough to slow down to speed up. This is an area where you have ego, which is great. That's what makes elite athletes, competitors, winners. That's what makes you a great coach, is that ego. But there's also vulnerability on the other side. And how do you manage the tension between both? Right now, if I think about it, a lot of programs are high level. They're in the gym. They're maximizing the hours that you get, which are allotted for this time frame. But you just said you came back off of last season and you did something a little bit different, which is more so relationships, communication, vulnerability. How do you balance both as an elite coach and an elite staff that it's going to make a difference in the fall? Because when we put reps in the gym, physically we can see a result. But when we do something maybe emotionally or intelligently, sometimes we don't always see those reps as fast as you would see a physical result. So my biggest question is, how are you managing the tension of both?
Yeah. Well, number one, you use tension. We'll use conflict. We think conflict is good. It's not a bad thing to run away from. We want things to be above the table rather than below the table, and so we're gonna deal with those things. It's rather than pretending that it's not there. That was one of the questions I asked our team this morning, and it turned into a pretty long meeting at the expense of reps, which was fine with me. Is how many of you have ultimate trust in every single player on this team? And how do we get there? How do we get to? I said it's not a big deal if we're not all there right now. February. But you better believe it's going to be a really big deal if you're not there in November and December. And so, how do we get that? How do we do that in practice so that it plays out in a way during matches, but more importantly during the tournament, or more importantly, if you're able to get to a Final Four playing in front of 20,000 people and another 1.5 million on TV. And so, it's so that tension that you said, I think number one, you've got to admit that it's all there and then come up with a plan for dealing with it. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I think the first part of it is you've got to recognize that it's there. I was listening to a podcast years ago, and it was a podcast Doc Rivers was on, and he said something that really really resonated with me, and I loved it. And the question was, what do you think you do best as a coach? And Doc said, I think I communicate and build relationships. I think I do that really well. And then the question was, all right, what do you wish that you could do better? What do you need to do better? And he said, I need to communicate and build relationships better. So it was his strength, but he showed how important he viewed those things were in the coaching profession and things that he wanted to continue to work on to improve. And he thought he'd get better results if he was able to do that.
Doc, you're smiling. Coach, you're spot on.
I'm only smiling because I think that's the logical next two questions for him, which is, what do you do best as a coach? What would you like to see that you could still do a little bit better?
It's probably both of those. I mean, I would probably say that those are probably strengths of mine. It's I don't know if I'd make it any more complicated than that. I think those are probably some things that, and I think I learned pretty well. I think it's it's really important to me. It's important for me to be good for our players and for our staff and for our families and for the university and the program. And for our fan base and for the sport. It's just the people that I admired, so many people that came before me that I admired and that answer a lot of my questions. Along the way, a lot of them that are Hall of Famers, a lot of them that have coached in the Big Ten and or just maybe toward the end of their careers in the Big Ten that answered the phone when I called. And I feel like I need to be. There's an element of being good for the sport, like those guys have all been good for the sport and for their fan base as well. That I'd probably say communication and relationships.
Oh, I love that. The other reason I was smiling, Jess, is he used a phrase that is near and dear to our heart, ultimate trust, which is a phrase that we coined one year when Nebraska won the title in 2015. But it takes so much work. Well, the book that you're reading now, obviously, that I've written, and then my original book, both have chapters called "The Power of Ultimate Trust." And so I'll be really curious when you've read both of those to see how close you are on how you build ultimate trust with your team. But the fact that you're talking about it in February for something that happens in December, I think is one of the greatest separators of the programs, that a lot of people think when we turn the lights on, it's just going to happen. And the work takes place in February to August in a lot of different areas, not just on the mental side and strength and conditioning, what have you, to be great when the lights are fully on August to, obviously into December. So, Coach, what did you, we've talked about it like this through listening to your messages, but when did you kind of figure out that a mindset component was important to the overall training of a volleyball player and a team?
Well, as somebody that was a cross-country runner, I think the importance of self-talk was always something that I've known it was pretty important. I'll tell you something. I don't. This want to be the first thing, but I'll kind of share a story. Quite a few years ago, I brought in one of the sports psychologists here in my office, and we sat down and talked. And I said, I'd like you to come into our, you or somebody that you recommend, come into our practice, and I just want you to do what you do. I want you to take notes and tell me what jumps out at you. What jumps out at you with my body language, with how I'm communicating, with how we are with our players, with staff and staff interactions, how our players are receiving information, how their body language is. What are you noticing? And she said, "Man, I love this. I'm so excited. This is exactly what I wanted, what I love doing." And I asked her, I said, how many of our players have you met with clinically? And she said a few. I said, well, then I'm not sure you can be the one that's in there. You're with them when they're vulnerable, and and I don't need to know who you're meeting with or what you're discussing, but they're vulnerable there. We're in the gym. We're wanting them to feel like they can conquer the world. And we don't know what the kind of the triggering that is. And, what led into that, I think I probably skipped a part of this. Danielle Hart, you mentioned her at the beginning. Her freshman year, she redshirted. And after that season, we're playing in the spring, and we go to some high school gym in Iowa, and we're playing Creighton, and we're getting our butts kicked. Both teams are really good, but they are hammering us, and we lose them. We get back. It's a spring match, and I go and I bring in one of my older players, Tiffany Clark, was her starting libero, highly competitive kid. And I brought her in my office, and I put part of the match up on our TV. And it's after an error that Danielle has had, freshman. First match she's played in college, spring match. She walks by and tries to kind of low five Tiffany. Tiffany walks right by her. And I just show that up on the TV. And as she's watching this, she drops her head. And I said, what are you thinking? And she said, I don't want to be that person. I just get so worked up that I don't know what to do. And it's a call for help. And it's my responsibility to give her the tools to be able to deal with that in that moment. And that's what started out the conversation with our, with the sports psychologist. Well, after that conversation, I talked to our associate athletic director, who's now our current head AD. I tell him this story, and he said, have you talked with the Center for Healthy Minds? I said, what is this thing that you speak of? He says, well, it's one of the leading mindfulness places in the world. It's right down the street. I said, I've been here for 5 years. How am I just now learning about this? So we had them come in and start working with us. They're now working with our football team or basketball team, Chad McGahee. And he's been great for us. But one of the things that just came out, we just had a meeting yesterday about it, 2 weeks ago. Our mindfulness coach, our sports scientist, our doctors, our sports performance people, our strength coach, our trainers, just released a paper, a research paper that just got published. The fact that, what is this? It is now proven that mindfulness leads to higher mood, muscle readiness to train, energy level, and a significant reduced likelihood of suffering an acute injury the following day of mindfulness. That's really powerful research stuff that has come from working with them and the information that they've got on a daily basis with some of our players, like a Sydney Hilly, that was totally into mindfulness and all those data points there. And it's turned into a research project from that day of not high-fiving a teammate. It's one of the things that's great about the college environment is being able to have resources like this to be able to help all of us, right? And so that's been a fun journey.
Oh, that's so cool. I showed a study to the Creighton men's basketball team, one of the few men's teams that I work with, that Steve Nash averaged 230 some high fives a game. He's number one in high fives, and they did a study on NBA teams that year and show that based on the number of high fives they gave, they went back and watched film, it almost correlated identically to the records of those teams. And so the fact that you noticed it in one interaction that led to this path for you, I think is what's so cool about sports and life sometimes, is so many times it happens because this happened, I explored this, and then our AD said this, and then we go down these really cool paths. So thanks for sharing that story. What you said earlier, because I'm going to throw it back to Jess, because I know she has some interest in this area. You had talked about the cohesiveness of your staff. And at one point it was pretty easy, obviously, because nobody had kids, and but now life, as you get together longer and longer, everyone's on these different journeys. Yeah, I know Jess has some questions about that role of the family in the overall well-being of a coach.
Coach, I know that you have 2 kids and you're a father. How does that work for you? How does that make you a better coach, right? 1, relating to your athletes, but 2, also being a great leader of those that you have on your staff. And you talked about the development from the very beginning until now. How have you evolved, and how has becoming a father made you a better coach?
I would guess that my journey is probably played out for a lot of people when they first get kids. I loved, I don't know how many times early on that I would stay in the office all night long. And it was awesome watching film, breaking down film and putting it on VHS, writing recruiting letter after recruiting letter. Just, there was no place on earth that I wanted to be more. And I loved it. Now, all of a sudden, when you're in relationships or you have kids, you're not going to do that. And there becomes a little bit of element of, am I going to be a worse coach because of this? And, I can't imagine I'm the only one that kind of felt that. And, and it's not guilt, but you want to be great for everybody that you're around. And then there was a point where when you lose, there's a process that you go through after losing. And for me, I have to watch film pretty soon. And once I watch film, then I'm fine, because now I can come up with a plan. And it's like, all right, I'm not a victim right now. I know what we did and what we've got to do. And so being able to watch that film gets me on the path. And if I just go to bed afterwards and I sleep, I tussle around and all of that, I have to get to the film at some point. But when you have a kid, after you don't play very well or after you lose, and they don't care whether you win or lose. They're a year and a half old. You're a dad, and let's go and get a hug, and they want to play with you because they haven't seen you all day long. You have to get over yourself really quick when you have little kids, because they just don't care, and that's not easy. It wasn't like that for me. I mean, it was, you have to give yourself permission to set it aside and be good for the people that need you to be good right there in that moment. And, I think having kids, it's one of the things I try to, our players are our kids as well. We need to, it doesn't matter whether they like us, but we have to love them. And that has got to be really important. And just having in mind, kind of like, I've got a 13-year-old and a soon-to-be 11-year-old. And what breaks your heart is if they have a coach and then they decide they no longer want to play that sport, or because of a teacher, they no longer like that subject. So when we have a coaches clinic here, that's one of the challenges I give to all the coaches that are in the stands. Do not be the last coach that this person has. Give them an experience and let them learn so much that they're excited more about the sport and want to continue it. Don't be the reason why be masked under something that is called competitiveness or something that chases them out. When you have kids, I think you're constantly have that, not at the back of your mind. I think that moves right to the front of your mind constantly in your interactions and communication.
How important is that role? And I mean, you have recruits and prospects you're always in communication with, you're developing before they get to your program. How important is that parent role when they're 16, 17, 18, even go down to 14 years old? Do you do anything specific when you're recruiting but also in conversation with parents when it's a legal time to communicate. How important is that parent role?
Well, it's really important. And I think there's coaches that try to push the parents aside. I think that's a mistake. I think you need to learn. If you're wanting to get to know somebody, you need to know where they come from. You need to know what they value. I think you want to try to put a village around that empowers people. So one of the things we do is every year at our we have a scrimmage before the season starts, and then after the scrimmage happens, it's either against each other or with new rules against another team. We take everybody to my house, and it's our players, and it's their family, it's our staff. It is everybody that has their hand in our program. So this past year was over 100 people there, and we all have food, barbecue, great barbecue, get to know each other. And then afterwards, we get in this gigantic circle, and we introduce everybody does introductions, and I have everybody that is, it could be our facility people, the people that sweep the floors, our academic people, our administrators, our equipment people, our trainers, and all of their spouses and families are there. Our police officers that are around, the security, it's everybody. And they tell them what they do for the program. And I think the message is that you're not here alone. There's a lot of resources, and we're here. All of us play a part in helping your kid be the best that they're capable of being on and off the court. I think sometimes just if we communicated our roles and what we're here for, it solves a lot of problems. It's one of the other things we talk about with everybody is it's hard what these student athletes are doing. I mean, it's really hard. But if they go into your office and you're an academic advisor and they are venting, you have a choice right there. As a parent, you have a choice when those phone calls come. You can sit there and say, man, that doesn't sound right. That's unfair. Man, you pick it, any of those line of responses. Or you can sit there and you can say, you can do this. You got this. Why don't you go have a conversation with your coach or with your trainer or with your professor or with your teammates? Right? One way weakens them, the other one strengthens them. And if we can get a community of people, everybody around these people, around these players, and all saying the same message, you got this. I know it's hard. You can do this. Go and get clarification. Go and talk. Be an active participant in your own rescue. We're lifting people up.
Role clarity at its finest.
Mm-hmm.
Doc, again, you're shaking your head.
Well,
We agree.
The key words that we always talk about, like this thing, we want our athletes to accept their roles, whether the role they want or not. But the coach has to set the tone on role clarity, not just for playing time and everything, but then what you've done is take it up another level, which is you're having your team, with your entire team, hear the role clarity with the roles of everybody. Because it's really hard to accept your role or to understand the role of others if there's not clarity about it. And so we feel that's just one of the key ingredients to championship teams. Is the two that stand out to me are role acceptance, but role clarity is a big part of that. And then building deeper relationships, with vulnerability being a component. So Coach, you talked about, some of the key common things we hear about the great coaches. There's a gym rat element. There's this really loving of the process, like breaking down film, sort of having a process to even, work through losses and wins to move on. And we've been around a lot of coaches in your age range who've had tremendous success. And, a couple of them that stand out would be Coach Urban Meyer, which I guess we haven't been around him directly, but know his story, Coach John Cook. And in their mid to late 50s, both of them after having a tremendous runs of success, had whatever you want to call it, probably a mental breakdown to some degree. Coach Cook's very open about it in his books. I wrote about it in my original book with his permission, but this chasing of perfection, this chasing of, if we don't win it all next year, what's it going to look like? And I'll leave you with this quick snippet because I want to hear what your thoughts are on how you navigate this at this stage of your career when you've already been at the top of the mountain, and 30-4 last year would seem like a gold mine to almost every coach in the history of the country, but maybe not for you, where you're at, how you navigate that. But Urban Meyer, after he won the national championship in 2008, I believe, literally there was an after party at his house, and he's in his room alone at midnight recruiting, and his best friend walked in and said, "What are you doing, Urban?" And he said, well, I'm recruiting. He said, we don't go 13-0 next year. Like, what are we going to? And this obsession of sort of like what I heard from Cook, especially after that year when they made the Final Four and almost beat Penn State with Jordan Larson's team, was like, we just won it all. We just maxed out. What if we don't next year? And it consumed him. It made him joyless, burned him out. Obviously, it got Urban sick and John sick to a point. When you hear those stories and you're starting to get into that stage of your career with similar success, how have you been navigating it, and how do you think you're going to navigate it so that you can have a preventative sort of component to not getting burned out or joyless?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I know John's story. I want to say that it was quite that, but I remember after 2016, and we had a great senior class. Lauren Carlini, Haley Nelson were two of them. Romana Krishkova, Tori Blake were also in there, and they got here. Their first year was my first year, and man, that class was special. I mean, they were all the way in, and it was. They laid it all on the line. They did everything. And it felt like their journey was kind of to get to a certain point that it was supposed to end a certain way. We all felt it. It was just this confidence and this work ethic and just everything that had gone there. And we're playing in the regionals on our home court, regional final, to go to the Final Four. We felt like we had a team that was capable of winning it all, if not the best team in the country at the time. And we're up 2-0 on Stanford. This is Inky Joniku's senior year, and Catherine Plummer and everybody else their freshman year. And we're up 2-0, and we lose the next three. And that was tough. A lot of reflection going into that, what we could have done better, how I could have been better during the moment. I might have gotten a little bit tighter. I remember us being pretty aggressive with serving. We missed a couple serves, and I start my body language and what I was saying to the team. So what do you think they did? Well, they dialed back, because now I'm, instead of letting it rip and giving them confidence, I'm becoming a barrier, not only Stanford a barrier, but I'm a barrier. So now they've got to beat me and them. And it wasn't demonstrative. It was just enough. And there's just, the margins are slim at that. And we lose in 5. And it was heartbreaking. I mean, it was probably the hardest locker room I've ever been a part of was that one. And afterwards, I remember just, I don't know if I want to continue to do this. It is so, you're just gutted. It just absolutely gutted. And I shared that story at our team banquet maybe a month later, of just the thought of, is it worth it? I remember a young Molly Haggerty at the time, who was just finished her freshman year, and she pulled me aside afterwards and just said, no, you don't get off that easy. You still got 3 more years with me, and we've got some things we've got to accomplish and stuff. But I think being able to have a little bit of space, probably part of that was probably fatigue as well. Of why are we doing this? Well, and I don't want to be somebody that is just in it for the wins and the losses. It has to mean so much more than that, of working with people, of helping them to grow and coming back. It was an opportunity to be able to look at why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I know it's a popular thing of saying, what's your why? But, you can call it that, you can call it whatever it is, but it was just of looking at what type of coach I want to be. We made it to the Final Four this year. We get hammered in sets 3 and 4. That was really hard. And it was one of the questions I got asked in the press conference, about that. Do you consider this year a failure? And I said, no. I said, it was one of the best seasons we've ever had. It was a heartbreaking loss. But why am I going to steal the joy out of these players and what they went through this season, what they'll be able to circle back and remember for the rest of their lives, by saying, because we had a bad hour, it's a bad season. I can't allow myself to think that way.
A lot of growth between the 16 and the 23 year and how you thought about things. Both of those ended in seasons that fell short on the win-loss column. So I have to ask you a little bit about the season where you won the national championship, because tell us about that year. I mean, again, a lot's happened. So, what do you think was the reasons why your team was able to climb that mountaintop and be at the very top when it's all over? When other teams that you've had of similar talent or more, it's hard to get there like this year in 16. And what was unique about that team, or what was different about that team that allowed you to get there?
So much goes into winning, right? And luck and draw and health and everything, confidence, and when confidence is needed, so much. We're coming out of COVID as well, right? The year before we play 48 teams all staying in Omaha in front of a couple hundred fans. I remember going into that season, we had a large senior class, and this is before anybody's still, we're still doing everything. We're not inside together, but they wanted to meet with me. They preferred to meet with me in person outdoors. And so we went to a park, I guess, and we got chairs and we were around each other. And the basis of this meeting was to tell me they were going to not play that season. They wanted to sit out that season. And wait a minute, what's going on? And it's they didn't want to get a season started and then their careers be done, and I guess I share that because it meant they were all the way in. They wanted their last season together that they're just all the way in. Now I think about it, that might have been before the 20 season rather than the 21 season, but it was the same group of kids regardless. One thing I remember about that Final Four, an epic Final Four. The play was just really, really high. We were just the one that fortunate to play. But that was Pittsburgh's first trip to the Final Four. Louisville was undefeated, number 1 seed going in there. Nebraska was Nebraska, and we were there. But the finals, when I think about that final match, us and Nebraska going 5, you think about what these players went through. They were playing in a match where we played them earlier that year. We swept them one time, we beat them 4 in the other. So we won 6 out of 7 matches. And they come out and they hammer us in set 1. Now, this is also a match where Lexi Sun wasn't playing. Remember, she'd been the starter all year long. Mm-hmm. And I go back and I watch, and you see a player that is on the sideline putting everything she can into her teammates. and playing with so much joy. I'm sorry, Nebraska's not in the national championship match if Lexi Sun is not on the sideline supporting her teammates that way. That was really, really important. And who was playing in front of her? A freshman, Allie Batenhorst, comes off the bench with courage and fight, confidence, and just letting it rip in a lot of ways. You look on our side, and we had a Georgia Chavita who had torn her ACL during the season and decided, I'm just putting on a brace. My career is done. I know it. And I'm going to go forward, and I'm just going to plow on this torn ACL because I can't have surgery. My career is over. So I'm just going. 2 weeks after that, she tears her plantar fascia. She's like the Black Knight, and it's only a flesh wound for those Monty Python fans. So you got a player like that out there. You have a lot of seniors for both sides that are out there. Nebraska wins the first set. They've got match point or a set point in the second set, and Grace Loberg gets aced by I think it was Akana that went back in aced her, I think, and it was either her or Kinsey. It was one of those two, and now they've got set points, Nebraska, to go up 2-0. And they go right at Grace Loberg again. And Grace sticks the pass. Sydney Hilly goes up, and you got the National Player of the Year, Dana Redke, up there on a quick. And Nebraska's all over that. They commit block on that gap set. And Sydney doesn't go to her. She goes over the top of her to Loberg, who just got aced, who just passed. And Loberg puts a perfect swing in the corner, ties it up. We end up winning the second set. Then you look at the fifth set, and our first server was with Jade Demps. Well, Jade missed her last two serves in the fourth set, but she's our first server in the fifth set. And we jump out to a 7-0 run off of her serve. Right. The confidence that she had in her ability to execute where we wanted her to put the ball was pretty special. But then you see the fight of Nebraska to get back into that match and just fighting and clawing and finding the way to get back into that. And then we think we win. We celebrate, and John challenges. Damn it, Cook. The guy challenges. He wins the challenge. And this lasts forever. I mean, like 5 minutes or so. And after that was really special because after that, at that moment, Kinsey Knuckles goes back and executes an awesome serve. I mean, under that situation, she has a service error. It's over. She puts an easy ball in. We've got a pretty good front row at that point. We're going to crush it. She executes a really good serve. We execute a really good pass. And then maybe the best rally of the entire match happens right there in that moment. I look at so many players that were laying it on the line, that played with courage in that moment. It was fantastic volleyball by other teams. We were just the team that was fortunate to win.
Oh, man. I just love the details there. How you feel like you were right in it and remember that well now as you're talking about it. You mentioned Lexi Sun's role. I am curious about, again, kind of circling back around to Danielle Hart. As I understand it, that year she got hurt. And I'm really curious about your thoughts on the role that she played on the team, because I always say life and sport are not always fair, and they're not. And in her case, it obviously wasn't, and that happens to lots of players. What was Danielle Hart's role in helping your team have courage or elevate performance and put them in a position to max out?
Flat out, 100%. We do not win a national championship without her role that season. She was playing really well. I mean, she was having early on what we thought was a first or second team All-American type of season. She was at her peak of powers at that point, and comes down on somebody's foot in practice, and tears her ACL, and and going through all that, and she's away from the team, as trying to get the swelling down and having surgery and all that. And there became a time that's like, Dan, we need you around the team. We're better with you around. And, I think she was the, we have a young Devin Robinson at the time that moved from right side to middle. Dan was really, really important for her. She was the whisperer, I think, with Dana Rettke. When she spoke, there was clarity, there was confidence, there was calm. And in big moments, you need all of those types of things, along with competitive drive. She's one of those people that you just feel better about yourself when you are with her. She builds others up. And you got to get over yourself when we talk about Lexi's son. She had to drop her ego and love her team. I'm not saying she had an high ego team, but anybody, a high ego on her, but anybody in that situation, it's not about you in that moment. And that is really, really hard when you're an elite athlete, or when you suffer an injury. You've got to get over yourself and your situation in that moment. You've got to get plugged back into your teammates. And Dan's ability to do that elevated us in a big way. Just like I guarantee Lexi's role, from afar, of how I see this from afar, how she responded to that allowed her team to be in that moment. And that's when it gets to be really fun, as a fan, as a coach, as a teammate, is when people are they're all the way in the deep end, and it's regardless of their situation or their lot in life. I'm just all the way in, because most people are only in when things are going well for them. Yeah, I'm all the way in, but on my terms. But when you can be all the way in when things are going poorly for you, that's when it gets to be special. Dan was fantastic for us in that season.
Clarity, confidence, calm, competitive fire. How do you impact winning, even if you don't score a point for the team? I think you illustrated it very well. I have one last question about that season. Throw it back to Jess. Sydney Hilly's your setter. Obviously, she plays for the Supernovas too. Dana Rettke was interviewed right after the game and talked about all these emotions that you've been talking about too, the competitives back and forth, the set that she got to kind of put it away, how you had to deal with the fact that you thought you'd won it. But she talked about Sydney Hilly being a great setter and the difference maker. Can you put into words what Sydney Hilly meant to your program?
No, but I'll try. My nickname for her was Compass. It's not something I referred to her. I didn't say, "Here, Compass, get over here." I wouldn't say that. But she was our compass. She has always been pointed north. She does the right thing almost all the time. And when you're not sure what to do, look at Sid. How she manages her academics, how she manages her personal life, how she manages her emotions and the team and her responsibility, how she communicates, all of those things. It all matters to her. She kept us grounded. She didn't go on big emotional roller coaster rides. She improved the things that she needed to improve on, and she wouldn't shy away from that. She graduated from high school a semester early. And she comes in, and she told me she was going to do that during her recruiting process her freshman year. She asked if she was allowed to do that, and I said, "Why are you asking that question?" And she said, "Because I'm not going to go to a school that doesn't allow me to do that." She's thinking that way as a freshman in high school. But she comes in here, And one of the first times I see her in my office, again, that spring semester of what should have been her senior year, she comes in and says, "Can I see all the disc reports of everybody on the team? Can I take them with me?" I said, "Yes." So I give her my binders. I got 2 binders with everybody's reports. And she goes and memorizes them. And not just what they are, but how to communicate to each of them. And then came back in there and she knew every one of her teammates. And she approached it like that every year. Everything mattered, not just setting the ball. I also asked her one time after her career was done here, I called her up and I said, "How often would you go and come in the gym and get reps?" And I was expecting her to say all the time because she was always in the gym. She said, "Never." I tell her team this story. I said, "What do you mean never? You never came in the gym and got reps?" She said, "No. Every time I came in the gym by myself, there was purpose for that. It wasn't just getting reps. I was working on something. I was trying to work on this. If I need to get better at this, then I'd go and I would do it until I got it right. And then I would leave. It was never just reps." That's just kind of how her mind was. She was so important for this program and what came after that, because she gave us an image of how to go about leading, how to be there for your teammates, how to learn, how to care, how to love, all that.
I always say you have to have enough talent to compete for championships, but it is not the talent that usually determines if you win it. It's all the intangibles. Jess, you've been listening to a lot of neat stuff Coach has been saying. I have one last question after this, but what are your thoughts? Any questions for him?
And I thank you for sharing that story. I'm excited. Maybe she'll be on the podcast someday. Who knows? I'd love it. One of the cool things that you noticed her caliber. You noticed how her mind worked. You didn't hold her back, right? You worked with her. And I really think when you have an athlete that is that elite, it's really, really special and sometimes really rare. But you have an opportunity to house a lot of those in your program today. What do you do when they struggle with failure to the point where it hinders their performance? And I know there's a sports psych there that you work with and other things, but being a female athlete and a perfectionist and achiever, how do you handle that in the moment, in a practice as a coach to embrace that? And how do you move on? I have a lot of athletes that listen that we serve as well that struggle with that, holding on to their mistakes because they're chasing this perfection.
It's tough. It's one of the things that make elite athletes elite, right? Is that this competitive fire of just trying to be the best they can possibly be. And when they're not that, it can be hard. We talk about constantly how are we going to respond? We spend a lot of time with that. Responding with strength and unity is really important. And so, we try to set up a lot of different scenarios where they're going to be tested. And maybe that's in practice, maybe that's a team meeting. Certainly that's in the Big Ten Conference or in the NCAA tournament where you're going to be tested. And maybe we're setting up scoring situations and practices or getting people out of their comfort zone. That's part of what we're supposed to do as coaches. Certainly when you go through spring training and you're working on new techniques and you're having to deal with the frustrations, well, then we've got to give them the skill set to be able to respond to that. You can't just yell at them and say, be tougher. You got to, they're responding a certain way because they don't have the skills to respond the way that you want them to. And us as coaches, we have to do that. We have to get in there, roll our sleeves up, get in the mud, and help them with that. But what I see a lot of times is coaches are excited on the sideline, and when they start losing or the team starts making errors, they get ticked off, they sit down, they put their elbows on their knees and their chins on their hands, and they sit there and they'll point to an assistant coach and say, see, look at all this stuff. Well, no, you want them to behave a certain way. You've got to train that and you've got to model that. And So we'll talk about responding appropriately a lot. And it's a skill just like passing or serving or hitting.
Mic drop. This is perfect. We have a lot of coaches that say that, right? But you're giving firsthand experience, and it just rings true. Can you roll up your
I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that I've got this thing figured out. That's a challenge for me to be over on the sideline. I mean, I cannot be a bear. I want to be a barrier a lot in practice. I cannot be a barrier for our team during matches. They have to know I'm with them on that. And that can be really, really hard. And just being aware is a constant thing. It's not here, we got this. It's a constant check-in. How am I right now? How my team seeing me in this moment? How are they hearing me? It's a work in progress.
Okay, one more. How do you transition from the practice gym, psychological safety, training safety, emotional safety, and then you're going into competition and everything is heightened? How do you make that transition? Is there a certain reset you do with your team just so they see you in one light, then you transition to the competition? Is there something that you use or that has worked successfully in the past?
I don't know. I think you have to talk about it early on. This is what you can expect out of me during our practices. This is what you can expect out of me and what I'm trying to do during matches. This is what you can expect out of me away from both of those arenas. This is how you can count on me to be there. You can call me at any time of day or night, and I will be there for you. But there's going to be some times that you're going to be tipped off at me in practice. And guess what? I don't care. I don't care. It's going to be uncomfortable at times. And if you don't know what I'm doing or what I'm trying to get to, then ask, and I will give you the truth. But it's not my job for you to be comfortable in that moment. But in matches, I will never purposely embarrass you. But I think part of it is communicating, right? And then the other part of it is you cannot embarrass your players publicly. You can't do that. You can't get in a press conference and lie into them. That's the wrong place. That's where trust is broken. You can't go and talk to a coach about your players won't do this or do that. No, I view it this way. If my players aren't doing something that I want them to do, it is my fault. If they're not doing something that I want them to do, it is my fault. I haven't trained them or I haven't rewarded the behaviors that I'm wanting. But your players have to know that you're in the fight with them.
I can listen to this all day long.
Yeah.
This is the work. This is why we're passionate to do what we do, is to serve elite coaches like you. And I'm going to go back to the visual image. Can you roll your sleeves up? Can you get down and just get with them in the hardship, the struggle, the uncomfortable? Can we embrace discomfort? And you're leading that. And I appreciate it. And the fact that you got fired up when you started talking about it. I want to stay on this place, but Doc, I know you have questions, but this is exactly the hottest topic right now for a lot of coaches at any level, and athletes to know that their coach is with them and in that moment with them.
Well, we have. I think sometimes as coaches, I'm from Indiana, and I was a teenager in the 80s, all right, and a young kid in the 70s. Well, what was the dominant personality in Indiana at that time? It was Bobby Knight. That was my image of coaching at that time. Sometimes what we see on TV is not what we should be trying to do, or sometimes we see coaches that are the professional level, or some of these things that make highlight reels, and we try to imitate that when we should actually probably be going in the exact opposite direction. Our players need to know that we're with them. They have to know that, and we have to be vulnerable enough to make sure that they know that we care about them.
Yeah. I mean, he just hits on all the ingredients of elite leaders and coaches we talk about: fighting that mixture of love and accountability, being vulnerable, having that open door policy where they know that they can talk to you about anything, not just when they're in trouble. I mean, modeling the behaviors that you want for those you lead, being relatively consistent as a human being and as a coach, and being reflective enough to say, what's my role in this? Am I creating fear? Am I creating barriers? And when you start to look at all that and add this ability to evolve and adapt, now you know why. One of the main reasons is teams have been highly successful over the years. My last question for you, Coach, is really, given where your program's at and where you're at in your career, what is the biggest challenge that you see, over the next few years for both you and your team going forward?
Getting to know people authentically is really challenging. I'm somebody that really liked the early recruiting. I'm probably in the minority of that. But, you mentioned Sydney Hilly. 4 years, I knew her and her family. Her coming to camps every year after she was committing. Her calling me after I'd watch her club matches and say, what's jumping out at you? What are you noticing? And us being able to, she knew our program. She knew what we valued. She was so prepared of coming in here because of that long runway. We'd had some transfers, but occasionally that pop in. But right now, nobody can have unofficial visits right now. We can't talk to anybody that comes in here as a sophomore, even if it's on their dime. We can't answer a phone call from a sophomore that says, here, tell me more about your program or about you. We can't have those conversations like what we used to. And right now, we can have a conversation with somebody June 15th, but look how many top level recruits have committed before July 15th gets here. Within 1 month, people are committing. Forget that. Look how many people have committed within the first week. And we've had some of them. We've had some of those that have committed after 1 or 2 conversations, or the transfer portal. Somebody gets in the transfer portal, and that commitment happens immediately. One of the things that I'm concerned about is with our program is just the ability to get to know people. Because what I don't want there to be regrets. I don't want them to get here and 2 weeks in of question why they chose here. I want them to know this is the right place for me. And so the challenge right now is really getting to know people. That's while decisions are being made, we're getting to know them after they're here. But sometimes that's, maybe you're not in alignment at that. And I feel like that runway of communication is getting shorter and shorter every year.
Fair enough. It is a challenge for so many reasons, not to include the transfer portal, NIL, et cetera. So a couple of things that I've heard, and kind of me wrapping it up, is I just love it. He said, you got to get over yourself. And that's whether you're a coach, whether you're a player, and then this notion that you've brought up a couple times more for our audience to remind ourselves is that you have to have awareness and then a strategy. Awareness of what I'm struggling with, aware that my self-talk is off, aware that I'm too hyped up, aware that I'm creating a barrier, causing tension for my team as a teammate, as you mentioned with one of the teammates in the video watch, whether it's you, and then a strategy to actually manage it. So I always say the great athletes and coaches struggle with everything the average person does, but the greats have an awareness of what they struggle with, and they have strategies to cope. Any last thoughts from you, Jess?
No, I appreciate your time. This is high level information. I will give kudos to your program. I saw a recruiting email go to a prospective, recruit that you're looking at, and the questions that you ask from your coaching staff and yourself to a club director are phenomenal. That is top secret, but you are already trying to be authentic in the process of relationships with local clubs, coaches. And so I just wanted to commend you on that. A lot of respect, as those questions were high level. And myself as the mindset coach for a club, I was like, that's awesome. So I appreciate your time, Coach.
Thanks, Jeff.
Any last thoughts from you, Coach? I mean, we've asked you a lot of questions, but any other thoughts on your mind?
No, I would guess the people that are listening to this are people that are trying to get better themselves, right? And it's just such a, I appreciate you guys doing this. I appreciate you having me on. These are topics that excite me, and as you can tell, and being a great resource for so many people, no matter where they're at in their experience with their coaching. I think this is, just appreciate you guys.
Yeah, well, thank you, Coach. I mean, it's a small world. I always say you just never know who you're going to meet. I'm thankful that I have a relationship with the Supernovas, was able to meet two of your athletes that we've talked about a lot today that you helped shape and form and are helping to create a really cool culture here with the Supernovas. And then because of that, I was able to come up and introduce myself to you at a club tournament. And within a month, here we are talking about what makes you great, what you still need to get better at. I just say our audience, which is full of coaches and athletes, love to hear from people that are great. That gives you credibility, but they don't want to hear about perfection. They want to hear about the challenges too and what you do about them, because that's how everyone grows and learns. So we're just very thankful that you were vulnerable enough to share the things that have gotten in your way, some of the cool things that have helped your teams elevate, and some of the challenges along the way that you face as a human being and as an elite coach. And we're just thankful to have you on. So thank you again for being on the Max Out Mindset podcast.
Thanks, guys.
Physical abilities such as strength, speed, agility, endurance, and coordination are fundamental in sports. But mental abilities such as focus, concentration, motivation, confidence, resilience, and decision-making can heavily influence an athlete's performance, especially when it matters the most. If you want the mental edge in sport and life, check out the Max Out Mindset for Volleyball book and workbook, or the Max Out Mindset for Softball book and workbook. A guide for coaches, athletes, teams, and parents to help you be in the best position to max out when it matters the most. Go to www.maxoutmindset.com.
You're listening to Max Out Mindset with your host, Dr. Larry Widman, performance psychiatrist and elite mindset coach to women in sports, business, and life.